we'll go. And it says we're recording. Let me switch views here. There we go. So this should be episode 23, I think, of the quarantine chat show we've been doing, which I call Both Laugh, because when I transcribe interviews, I like to, if we're both laughing, I like to actually note that so that the people can understand that. And that just kind of became my thing. So I call it Both Laugh, the Dying Scene Quarantine Chat Show. So thanks for coming on. This is
thanks for inviting me.
This is really cool for me on a personal level, because I attended, so I live just north of Boston, Massachusetts, but in my formative punk rock show going years, there was obviously a club for those that live in or around Boston called the Rat, which was like this legendary underground punk rock club right in Kenmore Square. And the only show I got to at the Rat was Guttermouth and 10-Foot Pole in
nice.
September of '97, and then it closed and became a luxury hotel owned by Boston University like a month later. So the only time I ever went to the Rat, thankfully, was for 10-Foot Pole, Guttermouth, and then I think the Ducky Boys, which were a local band, played, and there might have been a couple others too.
And it was pretty small for a Guttermouth show, right? Like it was like a little club, whereas most of the Guttermouth shows on that tour were kind of more like 1,000 seat, maybe not 1,000, but but bigger venues, like kind of more like a State Farm and or what's it called? But basically, like I guess on Guttermouth is probably 700 to 1,000 people. Yeah, most venues, whereas that was like a punk rock club, right?
Yeah. The Boston market could be weird for sort of 90s skate punk bands and stuff anyway.
Oh yeah.
But the Rat was a perfect place for a band like Guttermouth. It was small, it was gross, but it was like that was our place. You know what I mean? And again, I only got there once because I grew up like an hour north of there, and I think my parents were probably scared of me going to this place called the Rat.
Because how far is that from Cambridge, from the Middle East? That's kind of, whenever we were in that area, that's the venue where we seem to always get booked, whether or not it was intentional or not.
That sort of took over after the Rat closed down. The Middle East really took on that sort of a role for a long time. It has since kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit for various reasons. But yeah, it's probably, as the crow flies, it's like 2 miles. Now, traffic-wise,
it's close.
It's right over the river. Yeah, so as the crow flies, it's maybe 2 miles. Traffic-wise, it might be 45 minutes, but it's probably only 2 miles across the river. Yeah.
Nice.
So that was where most of the punk rock shows moved to after the Rat closed and became a luxury hotel, which is a thing that's been 20 years now, 23 years, and that's, people still haven't gotten over it.
Yeah, we never really did that well in that market. Like we had some good shows at the Middle East, but considering how big Boston is, it wasn't like, it was just very different from New York or places in Florida or other big cities where we could kind of reliably count on 100 people or more showing up. And Boston was more like, we might be lucky, there might be 75, but sometimes there was like 25. I don't really remember exactly, but I remember they kept booking us, so we kept going through, and a lot of times it was fairly small, but we still had a good time, and we knew where to park, so it was a reliable path to go through there. So I mean, maybe they're better than I remember, but I don't.
No, you're probably not. That sounds about right, truthfully. And I don't know why. Like I said, Boston is a little bit of a fickle market for that particular style of punk rock. Don't know why.
Is it because of animosity? Because I remember as a kid in the 80s, I remember there was a compilation when this is Boston, not LA.
Right.
This is Boston, fuck LA.
Right.
So I didn't know whether people just hated California in general, or was like, like whether it was a cultural thing, or whether they just didn't, weren't into skate punk or whatever we were called.
I don't think so. I think realistically, Boston is a small market. I mean, I guess we consider it a big city because it has 4 major sports teams or whatever, but realistically, Boston is a small market.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And most of the population doubles during the college, like the college calendar, September to May. The population of Boston itself essentially doubles because it's a college city. But if you get May through September,
In Spinal Tap, they said it wasn't. They said, "Don't worry about it. It's not."
Yeah, it's a fairly. I mean, again, it's a
I didn't
city.
realize it was that dependent on college. I never look up the statistics, but I just assumed it was like a big city like New York. Not as big as New York, but big, and that the college would just be like a little bit up and down. I didn't think of it as like Berkeley or something where it's like all of a sudden 40,000 people are there just to go to school.
Yeah.
In one area, and that doubles it. I thought that would just be like a blip on the radar.
Yeah, it's a few 100,000 college kids that
Wow.
come to the city. Yeah, and nowadays, so I have some friends, talk about getting wildly off track. I have some friends from Nashville that came to town probably 8 or 9 years ago, and they were in a band and they wanted me to show them around. And Boston now is not like the Boston that they picture, whether from movies like The Departed or from listening to This Is Boston, Not LA, or listening to bands like Dropkick Murphys or whatever. The Boston of that era hasn't been hasn't existed since the mid 90s because of the gentrification of the city. So yeah, that sort of rough around the edges Boston blue blood thing, that doesn't really exist anymore. It has moved to the suburbs for better or for worse. Which, when you grow up in the music scene or a fan of the music scene, it's kind of a bad thing. You like when it's gritty and dangerous, and that's what sort of drew us to the scene. But then being now in my 40s and having a kid, it's like, I like that it's safe.
I could see that. One of the first shows that we played, I'll tell you a little story if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So before 10 Foot, for people who don't know, so I'm in a band called 10 Foot Pole, and it was on Epitaph Records in the 90s. We kind of had some notoriety and we're kind of in the thick of things. We were, I would say, like profile wise, we were pretty big for not having a radio song.
Yeah.
Like the bands who had a radio hit, like Rancid and Bad Religion, and even Pennywise had a radio song. Obviously The Offspring would be a big one, but on Epitaph Records, those bands like sold millions of records and became big, and we were kind of more like a underground band that just kind of kept playing punk gigs and doing the punk thing. But before we were called 10 Foot Pole, it literally the same band, but we just changed names. Members have changed over the last, we're talking like 30 or 40 years now.
Right.
But like in 1982, we basically started, and we were called Scared Straight. And we were kind of we consider ourselves a melodic hardcore band. And we ended up changing the name because for a variety of reasons, but one of them was that we weren't really a straight edge band. Like that name was kind of neither here nor there. Right. We were clean cut kids when we were 13 and 14 years old, but eventually we didn't want to be kind of associated with that. And also straight edge became more of a dogmatic thing as we got older, and it became a very specific thing that we didn't fit into that mold. But anyway, one of our first gigs, we couldn't drive yet. I guess we were 14 or 15. Like we were just barely playing our instruments, and one of our, I think like our first real show. So we played at parties and things. Like we played at our junior high school in the lunchtime, and we played in people's backyards at parties with other bands. But one of our first real shows was at similar to, like you're saying, the Rat, in Hollywood. There was a club called the Cafe de Grand, and they had Tuesday Punker Night. It was like $1 to get in. And the Cafe de Grand had they had food for homeless, and so there were a lot of homeless Hollywood punk kids, and so they would show up and get food and then go to the show. So it was a cool place to play a show. In fact, one of our best shows was there was a riot outside, and they brought everybody in so they wouldn't be fighting with police. So we had like 300 people packed into the club. But that's not the story I was about to tell. You were talking about punk being dangerous, or not punk, but like the city being dangerous, and the vibes being dangerous. And at one of the first shows, I won't say who it was, but there was a guy who was a singer in an old band that was the singer of my band, not Scott Radinsky, not the baseball playing singer, but this is back when Scott was playing drums. The singer of my band, Mike Thompson, rest in peace, was a a big fan of like old punk. And so we go to Hollywood and he's like, oh, do you know what that guy is? He's the singer of this band. He's all, and he started kind of punishing him. Like he was kind of like following him around a little bit or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, this is a long time ago. I don't remember the details, but at some point we were at a table and our band was in a row, except Mike was sitting next to this guy who was the singer of a crusty older band. And he's punishing him a little bit. And all of a sudden the guy just whips out a knife and holds it to my singer's throat and says, shut the fuck up. And we were kind of like, well, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, right.
Because punk used to be dangerous. And
Right.
I mean, now maybe it will be again, because kind of our country is a lot more dangerous than it used to be. Like there's a lot more people who are ready to throw down and pull out guns or whatever than at any time in my life.
Yeah.
At least regular people. Like I've seen guns come out and stuff, but not like over politics.
Right. And over things like I didn't even see where it was, but over the weekend there was sort of a Black Lives Matter rally and a gentleman who was obviously on the other side, and a girl threw a cup of water at him and he pulled a gun on her for a cup of water.
Yeah, I mean it's real. I mean, I don't know. Just in neighborhoods where I am, there's all kinds of this. People are angry and just ready to everything. But back in those days, it was kind of like that. Like the punk scene was kind of more dangerous. The people who went to punk shows were kind of what I would consider kind of outcasts, like people who would be more likely to carry a knife on the street and need to, because they'd be in those kind of situations. And so for me in the 90s, when most of the shows we played were like kind of nice skate punk kids, I preferred that too. Like not just from getting older, but just for like, not having people at your shows getting shanked.
Yeah, right. I think we thought we were dangerous as somebody who, I'm 41 years old. So my formative punk rock years were those mid 90s as I was a late teenager into my early 20s. I think we thought we were dangerous at that point, but punk was too big a thing, I think, really. So you still had the small contingent, at least around here, of like the skinhead punks and then the anti-skinhead punks, who were probably realistically more dangerous than the skinhead punks. But that's another story altogether. And there were little pockets that were maybe dangerous, but the rest of us were mostly kids from the suburbs who got our parents to drop us off at the train station so we could come in to the city to go to the punk rock show. So we like to think we were dangerous, but I think I was kind of on the tail end of that whole thing. So
yeah, I think one of the first shows I ever saw wasn't me as a my dad had a sound company, and we provided stages for a Black Flag show when I was about 10 years old.
Oh, wow. What does that do to a 10-year-old kid seeing a Black Flag show in their heyday? Obviously,
I thought it was amazing, but the problem was we got there before the show was over, and my dad, they're like wood stages, and my dad starts taking apart the stage during a Black Flag show with more than 1,000 people in the audience, and 1,000 people of mean-looking people, not like friendly skate punks, but like kind of sha na na without the smiles looking guys, like the Fonz, but not so friendly and cool. And anyway, I convinced him to just go to Denny's and have some pancakes for a while, and but he was like he was a rocket scientist, essentially. He was like worked on gyroscopes and things for inertial navigation systems for cruise missiles during the Cold War. Wow. But on the side, our family, like his dad was a sound engineer, and so he had always been into electronics. And so kind of for his sanity project, when he wasn't building weapons of destruction, he was filming football games, and then we started doing sound, and we had these stages. And so my introduction to the punk world and in general the performing world was doing these, not major level gigs, because we had wood stages in our backyard. Like we weren't the people you called if it was Kenny Rogers. We were the people you called if it was like, hey, I'm putting on a show in the park and I need a wood stage, I heard you guys would do it cheap. I mean, we did some big gigs, but not many. And so that was my introduction to music, and that kind of thing in general was just like DIY stuff in a local and regional situations. And then as the business grew, we got into more like kind of bigger shows and stuff. And at some point I became the manager of the company. And so I purposely kind of, went out and got gigs. And in fact, like, I was even like a promoter for a No Effects show, and provided the stages and the sound and the lights and stuff. And because I wanted to be around punk rock and stuff. So we toured with No Effects in '85. So I already knew the guys from, from before that. And Scared Straight and No Effects did a little winter tour in Texas and the South.
Oh, wow.
Wherever that was. Yeah. Back before they were great.
So what is that? So if you're the guy that owns the stages, right? And you, like your dad, and he may not know from punk rock music, but he knows that he owns the stage that Black Flag is thrashing about. Does that make him nervous about, like, what are these kids doing on my stage? Like, the sort of liability piece, or that's my stuff. It's like you couldn't have picked the Peter, Paul, and Mary gig. You had to pick it.
Yeah. I didn't feel like, there were things that happened, like riots and stuff, where stuff would get down. In fact, even though punk was less dangerous in the next decade, more damage was done to sound gear. Like, Pennywise inviting 500 people up on a stage and breaking the stage. I knew the guy who owned the stage where that happened in Santa Barbara, or the Warped Tour, or wherever it was, and he was real bummed. He was real bummed. But I presume he had insurance or whatever. But even if you have insurance, it's like, okay, they pay you what it's worth, but it's kind of like if you crash your car, they pay you what the blue book on your car says, but maybe you did a bunch of work to your car to make it, converted to be what you wanted. And just because you got the dollar figure doesn't mean that doesn't represent like a huge amount of work that you have to do to get it back up to where it was for your company or whatever. But
and you've probably got
my dad never really argued about that. I mean, luckily we didn't, I don't remember. I mean, we had damages over the years, but like one of the biggest damages we had was in Westlake, California, which is a really posh area. And we had set up a wood stage for a jazz concert in a park, and they didn't have security, but it's like a really nice area, like a really fancy area. And someone went through and stole all the C-clamps from under the stage. So like our stage was wood stages, and like kind of like screwed together in 8x4 sections, but then those were held together with C-clamps. And we would level it and put shim under it, and it was a process. And someone went through and stole all the C-clamps, which was, I don't know, maybe it was like 80 C-clamps worth $4 each or something. It was hundreds of dollars worth of stuff. But I don't, like, what are they going to do with 80 C-clamps? It's not like you could go out and sell it, or, I don't know. It was just probably vandalism or whatever. But
did you have a
but that's funny that it was for a jazz show in a really nice neighborhood, whereas we did stages for Black Flag, and maybe a piece of wood got broken or something, but it wasn't like no one went in and stole a bunch of stuff.
Did you ever, were you treading on enemy territory? Is there a rival stage company in Westlake?
I doubt it. Not someone who had wood, but maybe it was the guy who Pennywise's stage broke, because he was out in that area. So maybe it was him, and maybe that was just karma. So thank you, bro, him, for wrecking a Jim Jennings stage.
Let's talk about Simmer Down. This is a fun album. I like the fact that there's a lot of new songs on the album, because I think it's sort of a thing that people do at a certain point, where you do acoustic versions of all your old songs and the hits, and you sort of, it's like a repackaged greatest hits thing, right? And that's fine for fans of a band. I'm a fan of Face to Face and have been for years, and they did an acoustic thing.
Yeah, it's great. It's really nice.
Great. But I like the fact that it's maybe half new songs on this. Why go that way?
Well, the reason I even wanted to do acoustic was that I just kind of grew. Well, first off, all my life, depending on the mood, I've preferred acoustic. Like I loved Black Sabbath and like loud and heavy bands, Iron Maiden and whatnot. But there were some bands that would do acoustic versions, and I found myself drawn to it for whatever reason. There's something about just like acoustic guitar and a vocal that is more like you feel more connected to
Mm.
the emotion of the song, and like you understand the song better. And so just for example, like Nirvana or even like Joey Cape and Tony Sly's thing, like I could listen to the Nirvana Unplugged album from end to end,
Yeah.
sometimes multiple times. Like if I was driving or doing yard work or something, I might just let it roll and I'd kind of be singing along. Once in a while I might fast forward. I could not do that with a Nirvana rock album. Like
Yeah.
I love like 5 Nirvana songs, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to hear 13 Nirvana songs on a rock album in a row. Like no way in hell. Um, and even depending on my mood, even with No Use for a Name or Lagwagon, after maybe 4 or 5 loud rock songs, I might not be in the mood anymore. But I could listen to Joey and Tony
Yeah.
sing their acoustic songs
Right.
for hours. Like I could just loop that.
Right.
So I just love that. So first off, I love that. But secondly, I'm a sound engineer and I tour. I've done hundreds of shows with Jimmy Eat World and toured with Prince and Weird Al Yankovic, and so a lot of my life is spent on the road by myself.
Mm.
And I found that, and I started playing acoustic guitar because when I took electric guitars with me, I was just bored. The electric guitar for me wasn't interesting enough or good sounding enough on its own
Yeah.
to
It's not
enjoy
the
it.
same. Yeah.
And so when I started playing acoustic, it's like, oh, this just sounds good. And when I sang with it, like sounded good. And I started off in private, but then I started like kind of inching out into public. Like I'd go out on the sidewalk or I'd go into a parking garage where it just sounded good. And
Yeah.
I'm just doing it for myself, but just enjoying it. And then I started getting like kind of little like positive reinforcement from people. Like people would see me singing in a parking lot. Like one person walked by one time and just randomly threw down $20 and go, "Ah, keep it up, you're okay." And
Great.
like not punk people, just random
Yeah. Yeah.
people on the street. And I'm not saying that every time I walked out, it was like suddenly there was like, a light shown and hundreds of people collected. It wasn't like that,
Right.
but it still was more than I expected. It
Yeah.
was more positive than I expected. And there were times, especially like in Canada, there were times where I was singing 10-foot pole songs and all of a sudden, someone would recognize it or start singing along. Like one kid comes up and goes like, "Oh, wow, you're doing a 10-foot pole cover. I don't know anyone who could sing The Getaway. Like, that's really cool. I like them too. And so those kind of things happen. And I got the confidence to step it up and start doing shows. And so while I was on tour, it was like, I try to book little shows on my days off and play to people on the sidewalk and like purposely play in front of people. And I liked playing the old songs, but I also used it as a way to write new songs.
Mm.
Like I found that if I'm comfortable playing this, it must be a good song if I'm confident enough to do it.
Yeah.
And if I'm not confident enough to sing it on the sidewalk, I probably shouldn't put it on a record. And so I developed new songs as we went, and that's kind of how Escalating Quickly was pretty much written that way. Like a lot of acoustic guitar songs that then we kind of punkified and try to make it rock.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's not an acoustic record.
Yeah. So the last 10-foot pole record, Escalating Quickly, I don't know the percentage, but I'd guess maybe 80% of those started off as an acoustic song
Wow.
with me like out just singing. And that's why, uh, uh, like a lot of the songs like Numb and Don't Be a Dick were like me specifically trying to get the audience to sing a lot, or even Everything Dies. Like the most fun thing for me was singing and playing and having people sing back.
Yeah.
So I'd go like, "Don't be a dick," and the crowd would go, "Dick, dick, dick, dick," or even on Numb, like, "Hey, cranking out the numb, numb," and people just would be giggling and going like, "Numb," and and yeah, it wasn't like a tough guy masculine, punk rock thing that you would expect from 10-foot pole, but it just is fun,
Yeah.
and so there were songs with a lot of simple things like Everything Dies or something where they just have to know dies.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, and so that's how those songs developed. But anyhow, so with Simmer Down, I thought by having an outlet to put some new songs on there that I thought would be cool to do just acoustically,
Mm.
as well as to include, like you said, the greatest hits. Basically, for me, the most fun is to try to do new songs, but I know that our old crowd wants to hear the old songs. So I
Mm.
just kind of split it right down the middle and said like, well, let's put these so they're not one mad. You know, we don't want to like,
Right.
we already made people mad with escalating quickly by letting Ryan Green play keyboards and stuff.
Yeah, right. Right.
And it was pretty poppy too. So it's like, you know, we hadn't done a full record in a long time, and then we come out with kind of a poppy record, like especially after Subliminal Messages. A lot of it was poppy too, but at least the album started out with like
Yeah. Right.
you know, and you know, to go into like don't be a dick was tough for some of the fans. So anyway, so just to throw them a bone was like, okay, I'll do like, we'll try to make sure we get like My Wall and ADD and like kind of the biggest ones in there. And but I tried to do them differently, and
Yeah.
that also became fun. Like the Getaway was probably my best experience, like because I really wanted the Getaway on there, and I played it a bunch of times. It was just like I didn't want to just replace electric guitar with acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
That was just kind of boring to play. It's such a long song too. It's like I don't want to just sit there on acoustic ding 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 ding
Right.
ding,
Right.
you know, forever. And so once I added that little part I added a part in the chorus where I say the Getaway, but then the chords change under it. Like I repeat the same line, but the chords change under it. It's like, oh, wow. And I kind of slowed it down, and it became this like really sad song, which I always thought the Getaway was kind of like my way, like Frank Sinatra. I did it
Yeah.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
way, you
Right.
know, regrets. I've had a few, but then again, you know, and I kind of felt like the Getaway was like that, but the Getaway was kind of this romping, like, I gotta make a getaway. And this one was more like, okay, this guy's about to blow his brains out, and he's like saying goodbye. And it just turned
Yeah.
into like, and by having the cellos
Yeah.
and slowing it down and doing that kind of wistful part under it, it just, to me, it was like really fun and really gratifying to play. Like because I do sound for bands like Beck and stuff
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's like like having done sound for Prince and Beck and Jimmy Eat World and artists like that, like I know that you can make something just beautiful, and it's really amazing. It doesn't mean that your whole band has to always play like pretty stuff, but it's neat when it happens sometimes. Just like this moment where a hard band da, 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 and then suddenly just blows your mind with some beautiful part that's just melodic and makes you want to sing, and is kind of pulling at the heart and stuff. And so for me, that was really gratifying to do that, and I'm really glad. I'm glad that I stuck with it, that I didn't just give up on it and go like, screw that song.
Well, and that's the mark of a good song too, right? A song that that you can completely rearrange it. I thought the Getaway was almost unrecognizable from its original, and it took me a little while to realize what song I was listening to, and that the original is a song I've heard 1,000 times. So
Nice.
I think that that's the mark of a good song, right? Is that you can change it like that, and you're right, it gives the song an entirely different feeling, even if it's the same song, right?
Yeah.
It really kind of pulls on different parts of the song emotionally as well as sonically. But I think that's the mark of a good song, when you're able to do something like that. And I'm glad you went that way, and not just again, there's some validity to when people do a stripped down acoustic regular version of a song. But I like that you can sort of rearrange it and, like you said, add the strings to it, and that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's gratifying to change things sometimes, but sometimes people want to hear it the same. Like, so like Broken Bubble, I try to do more like how it is on the record, more or less. I mean, it's an acoustic version, but it's pretty true to how the record is. And and ADD as well is kind of, you know, I didn't stray too far from where it was, but with some, especially with my songs, I took more liberty, like with I mean, all those are my songs as far as like lyrics, but
Yeah.
as far as the music, um like it was fun to do like the song Numb, for example. Like Numb is like this poppy dance number on Escalating Quickly, and then on Simmer Down, it's just like, it's got elements of like kind of a Latin vibe with the
Yeah. Yeah.
strumming of the guitar is very, you know, Latin, but and then it has like kind of a Hotel California vibe. When the solo came out, I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize this was Hotel California, but it kind of is. And yet with the vocal, because it was kind of talking about being numb and stuff, I was like playing with the effects and trying to make it sound
Yeah.
trippy. So it was kind of like our trippy you know,
Right. Right.
like just very different, poignant, trippy, um, song with kind of a Latin groove to it. Very different from that kind of dance hall numb,
Yeah.
numb
It's
on escalating quickly.
especially with the
So
synth that's on the original one. It's almost like an anime theme song at the beginning, especially. That's yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, Ryan added that keyboard part.
Yeah.
And and that also, you know, that it might be worth mentioning that so on all the other 10-foot pole records, like I've always been kind of in there and, you know, bothering the producer, but generally you pay a producer to tell you no. So when you're making a record,
Yeah.
like the idea is you hire someone who's done a lot of records, who has good taste and a good sense of what works and what doesn't work, so that they can shut down your bad ideas. And that's exactly it. And so and so on every album, for more or less, we relied on a producer's opinion, or in the case of escalating quickly, like I really delegated a lot of creative control to Ryan.
Yeah.
And so on every album I've delegated more or less, especially escalating quickly, a lot. And this record, Simmer Down, I went the other direction. Like I was a control freak. It was like, this is my record.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm gonna like just like, not that I'm not going to take other input from people, because we always have, like, everyone from the band puts their input in, but rather than Ryan being like, yeah, I like that bass line, I don't like that bass line, it was me. So me being like, you know, hey Richie, can you play this like legato instead of staccato? Or, you know, maybe this is where, like, for example, we brought in my friend Aaron, who played in Sam I Am and Mr.
Yeah.
T Experience. He's like really smooth and just a very different thing. Or it's like Richie's just always rocking.
Yeah.
So we brought in a guest bass player on a couple of songs, and that was it was fun to do that. I mean, the reason I did it was because of the pandemic. Like I couldn't go to another producer,
Yeah.
and I also was a sound engineer and always thought, and even Prince told me that I should make a record, and so I was kind of always thinking like it'd be fun to try to mix a record.
Yeah.
It's because I you know I'm very accomplished at doing live concert sound,
Right.
but
Right.
making a record's different. And so I wanted to try, and I had and I had the time to fail. That's the big thing. It's
Yeah.
like,
Right.
I'm going to be here for months, if not years. I might as well learn how to do this stuff. Like a lot of my peers in the industry were learning different things, which maybe I should be too. But I thought about, like, should I learn a new console and like really get good on this console, and be like, what's the point? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to use it for more than a year. I'm going to forget everything.
Right.
Like if the goal is literally to learn how to use this piece of hardware, and then you don't use it for a year,
Right.
there's going to be very little retention. So I thought, let's focus on making a great sounding record, and that'll get my brain thinking about sound and working on sound for 12 hours a day, and working on my skills and my like my hearing skills and my producing and those skills, while also making a record that hopefully people will like. And so far people have been really excited about it. So it's not that I want to be a record producer mixer, but I was thinking that it would be fun to control the art and see if
Yeah.
people liked what I would do. Because a lot of times I get in arguments with Ryan Green and people like that. And sometimes, and you're paying them to tell you no, but sometimes you really think they're wrong.
Right.
Like sometimes it's just like, and I was just talking about that the other day with a friend was saying his favorite song was a song that before I decided to do it myself, I was talking to a different producer about it. It wasn't Ryan, but a different guy. And he was like, no, you shouldn't do that song. That sucks. And and this fan was saying, oh, this is my favorite song. I was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't let that producer talk me out of doing that song.
Right.
And that's the thing, is like, even someone who's a producer who's had a lot of success, it doesn't necessarily mean that their subjective opinions about music are always correct.
Right.
And it could be that they're right for a big group of people, but it could also be that they're just used to being the producer. They're used to being a boss, and they lay down the law, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they aren't. But I thought it would be fun for me to be the one making the call, and let the audience decide. Like, if people love Simmer Down, then maybe I shouldn't pay someone to tell me no so much.
Did
Right?
you record at your house? Do you have a studio set up there, or is there a studio nearby?
Some stuff I did. Before the pandemic really got rolling, I was already making this record. I mean, it was already So there's a studio in Boise. He calls it the Chop Shop, and it's behind a music store. And Andy Agenbrod is the name of the owner. And we did most of the lead vocals. I'd say maybe 3/4 or like 70% of the lead vocals and main guitars I did there before the pandemic. And
Okay.
then when the pandemic got rolling, I just kind of like started just doing everything in my room. I mean, it's all stuff I could do. I just
Yeah.
thought having someone there, there's benefits of doing it different ways. Like if I'm by myself and doing vocals, I'll typically I'll take a verse and just like make the computer like kind of set for the verse, and I'll just do like 20 takes of the verse. Like on a demo, maybe it's not
Yeah.
as many, but on the real record, like I'll just do a whole bunch of takes. And I don't know, like maybe I'm missing a note every single time on the same word, and I've got 20 takes and they all have that one word screwed up.
Yeah.
But usually as I go through the takes, like so then you take a compilation of those takes, and like let's say there's 6 lines. It could be all 6 lines from one take, from take number 37, or it could be like a different word from every
Yeah.
take, like,
Right.
and it could be that just this one note, like maybe it's a big long note that I held out at the end of the line, and I'll like literally listen to every one of them, and then you basically splice those together in that like compiled composite, and that composite track is like, that's your lead track now,
Yeah.
if you can make it all like flow smoothly. So that's kind of the process of doing that. And when you're alone, you don't know whether you have enough good ones yet, because you're performing, you can't be listening. So
Yeah.
if you have a producer sitting there, he can be like, okay, we can move on. But when you're alone, you don't know you can move on, so you sing
Yeah.
it way more times than you really need to,
Right.
and you have to go through all these like way more stuff. So the basic idea is, if you have a producer who's good, you can trust them. Once they say move on, you move on, and you can go much more quickly. And also they're usually, more skilled than I am with the stuff, so they can also kind of
Yeah.
lay it out. Like working with guys like Ryan Green is just like, if you play the guitar part right once, great. He might just go copy paste, copy, copy,
Yeah. Right.
like, okay, we're done. You did it. I'm like, what? Not usually, but he could. Like, he
Yeah.
has the ability to just like, he's a master, and just and you're done. So
Having
it
been
saves you a lot of time.
having been lucky enough to visit people when they've been recording, not with guys like Ryan Green, uh, but even more locally, there's a couple of really good producers in this area, and being friendly enough with bands and getting to go visit from time to time and watching somebody that's really good with the software, especially when you get a particular part, is mind blowing actually. And because I think in terms of when people used to record to tape, and so it's this whole big long process, and they go, nope, you can get it, and we can adjust this, and we can pitch modulate that, and how the hell do you do that? It's a whole different thing, I think, than record production used to be.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the things were done back in the old days, but it just took way longer.
Yeah, right.
And I remember one of the first times we recorded ADD, our producer took out a razor blade and spent like 3 hours like getting the part in the middle, the dun
Yeah,
dun. It's not even the one that ended up on the record. It was like a recording that we did that we didn't end up using.
yeah,
But and Tony is a great drummer. Tony plays for
right,
Papa Roach now.
right.
But this producer was like, this doesn't groove. This didn't groove, and now it does. And there were like 200 splice marks where he took a razor blade and shifted things ever so slightly in time to
Right.
make it like groove the way he wanted to groove. And like now you can do that with Beat Detective or whatever.
Right.
Um, you can just do a bunch of different takes, but sometimes the drummer just hears it a certain way, and the producer's like, no, it needs to be like
Yeah.
this. And that's what a producer can do. And yeah, something that took hours and hours and splice tapes and all this stuff before now can be like, maybe a half hour of clicking and shifting things in time. But one thing I wanted to mention before I use up too much time is another exciting thing about acoustic for me is the intimacy of the shows and being
Mhm.
able to talk kind of like we're talking now,
Yeah.
my dream, I'm trying to basically shift the paradigm of what it really would take for us to be able to tour, or for me to be able to keep touring.
Mhm.
As we talked about at the Middle East, if I get my whole band there and only 25 or 75 people show up,
Right.
like I've just lost a whole bunch of money,
Right.
because the cost of, you know, the um, the cost of even just getting the band all in the same city is
Yeah.
enormous.
Yeah.
And then driving around and hotel rooms and all the different costs involved is astronomical, feeding everybody. And so one part of this acoustic idea is I kind of had this vision or dream, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to live in the dream.
Yeah.
Is I want to kind of be like a Johnny Cash meets Henry Rollins. I want to go and do these shows where I could just monologue and chat for a while and sing some songs. And so the idea I had, or what I'm trying to pursue right now, I mean, obviously with the pandemic, everything's on hold, but the basic idea is to be able to do house parties,
Mhm.
maybe like in the backyard or whatever, and not have all the overhead of a club. Like at the
Mhm.
Middle East, when you play a show there, you know, they've got security guards and ticket takers and you know, audio and lighting
Mhm.
and a manager, and like there's all these different expenses involved.
Mhm.
And whereas if I show up at your house,
Right.
and if you know 20 people who are willing to pay $20 or something to see this show,
Right.
I just basically like paid my expenses.
Right.
So so my idea would be like, what are the parts of touring that I hate? Long drives and you know, fighting with people, or like, and losing money,
Yeah.
and like all the, like all those factors. So I was thinking, I'm not going to give up on the rock version, but I wanted to have like a whole alternate reality where, you know, the rock tour is something that we could do once in a while, and I'll
Mhm.
probably lose money on it, but it's kind of, it's its own thing. Maybe we could play festivals or other things,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but besides that, whether I'm doing sound and I'm out on tour, or whether I'm just doing it just an acoustic tour, if I show up and play at a house and 20 people show up, um, to me that's a successful day. Like,
Yeah.
because I get to sing songs and talk. Oh, another thing I like about touring is talking with people. And
Yeah.
when you're at a big loud noisy rock club, you can't talk
Right.
to people.
Right.
So even at the merch booth, like if we go to a club and I'm at the merch booth, there's always loud music playing, and I'm probably got earplugs in my ear, and
Right.
someone's trying to chat with me at the merch booth, and I'm
Right.
like, well, I don't want to scream over this noise, because then I won't have a good singing voice for later,
Right.
and maybe I won't be able to sing tomorrow too, so I'll screw myself up. But if it's at your backyard party and it's just me singing and talking, then when I'm done singing, I could have a chat with somebody. And if
Yeah.
there's only 30 people there, it's very like an intimate one-on-one experience. So I'm trying to turn it into, like, my dream is basically to go on tour where I don't drive more than 2 or 3 hours a day, like just
Yeah.
little, because if, say I'm playing in your backyard to all your friends and family, like we could do a show 2 streets over to some other person who has a
Right.
whole different group of friends,
Right.
like, and maybe even like I could do 5 shows in one city, and no one even knows each other, maybe, you know, like, I mean, that's
Yeah.
totally possible.
Right.
And as long as I'm making my daily kind of expense, and my
Yeah.
kids aren't starving, I think that's exciting to think about. But most importantly, I bought this Sprinter when things were going really well. I had a year worth of audio work lined up,
Yeah.
and I bought this touring van so I could build beds in it, because I'm an old guy and my back starts
Yeah.
hurting.
Right.
And I have to somehow justify that to make it look like not the worst decision I ever made in my life. So kind of necessity is the mother of invention. I
Yeah.
have this
Right.
huge van payment that I've been paying, and I have this van sitting by my house with beds in it, and it's just sitting there. And so I've got to figure out a way to make those van payments, and to make it so I can tell my family and all the people around, see, I wasn't totally
Yeah.
crazy.
Right.
Like, at the time I was thinking this will be a great write-off, like, you know, because I've got all this money coming in doing sound,
Yeah.
and instead of paying 30% of that money to taxes, like I get to write off the cost of this expensive van.
Yeah.
And anyway, so rather than just accepting that it was foolish and a loss, I'm
Right.
going to twist my whole reality to be like, I'm going to be on tour with this thing at least 5 months a year. Like if I go on 2 tours a year with the van, it pays for itself,
Yeah. Right.
because the cost of renting a van is really expensive. So anyway, it's my stubbornness that's driving this. But at the end of the day, I think it'd be really cool to just be at somebody's house, play a bunch of songs, chat with people. You could ask questions. You know, if there's only 30 people,
Yeah,
I
right.
do Q&As right in the show. Like,
Right.
you know, I might stop a song and go, does anyone want to know, you know, what the context to this lyric writing was? Does
Yeah.
anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
And
I think that's cool. I
I
think that's
hope
cool.
so.
Yeah.
I think there's enough people who enjoy it. So I've really done this a few places, like in Quebec
Yeah.
and so some parts of Ontario and just random places where I put on shows at South America even. Um, uh,
Is
and it's
that like
gone really well.
is that like while you're on tour doing sound with a bigger tour and then you kind of do your
Yeah,
own pop
sometimes.
gigs? Is that or is
Yeah.
that even the goal going forward with the van? So you obviously you're not nobody's doing Prince dates anymore, but if you're doing sound on a bigger tour like that, like you take the van behind and kind of follow it around and then do your own gigs.
Oh no! If I'm on tour with someone else, I'm with them, and then it would just be like on days off doing gigs. And yeah, I did do that. Like when I say South America,
Yeah.
I was in South America with Jimmy Eat World, and on a couple of days off, I played shows. Some of the first shows I ever did acoustically by myself,
Wow.
and you know, but just a day off, and
Yeah.
you know, but those were actually at venues, and you know, maybe like 50 to 100 people were there, and we did that in Quebec, and like bigger shows, like
Yeah.
100 or more than 100 people, and and so then the other thing I did in Quebec was a whole tour with the van. Actually, that wasn't with the van yet. That was borrowing a truck, but the van would have been easier.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I don't know the exact, you know, what the exact scenario will look like. But
Yeah.
basically, the idea is that if I can get on the road and just go show to show to show to show, without it being like spending a whole bunch of money on one flight or a 12-hour drive, like that just seems like kind of a nice life. And so
Yeah.
that's where I'm trying to get, whether or not it'll happen right away.
Yeah.
But what I think is in it for the audience is, I think that compared to being in a dirty, loud rock club, at least for older people like me, like who prefer acoustic music or at least enjoy it, you know, seeing that might be a different and possibly better experience than trying to see the band. You know, being able to talk one-on-one and having that like hanging out in a backyard rather than being in a loud rock
Yeah.
club where it's just, you know, bashing cymbals all night.
Well, and realistically, that might be the model for the next couple of years coming out of this pandemic sort of thing anyway, right? Is there aren't going to be many options for sweaty underground basement rock clubs. So the idea
I would
might be,
think, yeah.
or it's probably a little more tangible to do something like you're talking
I
about.
would think so, and that's why I say backyard is because
Yeah.
of the fresh air.
Yeah.
Like you really shouldn't be in a room with somebody who's singing a lot
Right.
and getting their stuff into the air. So I was thinking in a backyard and you're
Yeah.
spread out and there's only 20 or 30 people and they're, you know, and maybe it's just your friends and family. Like if somebody basically, I don't know how the business of it will go yet, but the basic idea is that somebody makes a guarantee to pay my expenses.
Yeah.
And then it's up to them. Like maybe it's 3 people joined together and they, you know, maybe it's one person and he's like the big host, like, hey, all my friends and family come to this party.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I brought this guy, you know, or it could be the other end where they're like advertising for tickets to people they don't know. But especially if it's still in a pandemic situation, you know, people would be more comfortable if it was just their families and friends and stuff. And so people could be generous and just be like, okay, I'm going to pay for this and we're just going to have a private show, you know, and like I'm basically trying to set my expenses and my prices to where they can do that without it being like
Right.
only for super wealthy people. And it really just depends on how many shows I get. Like, I mean, my expenses are, you know, for traveling and for, you know, being able to feed my kids and whatnot. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up because to me, that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
exciting. I'm like really, especially if someone likes Simmer Down, likes the basic idea. I mean, of course, if I'm by myself, it wouldn't have the drums and bass and stuff, but
Yeah.
at least you would get kind of the core of what it is and have that happen in your yard.
That's
But
a cool
if
idea.
anyone's hearing this and wants to hear the music and see if this is actually ever going to happen, 10footpole.com is the
Yeah.
best.
I'll put all the links to all of that stuff, especially like if I upload it to YouTube and what, yeah. And so I'll put all the links in the YouTube description about where they can go
Nice, thank
find
you.
you and and find the music and where they can stream it and all that stuff. And,
Yeah, and that's for all the contact information and music links and news about what's happening. And we also have a Patreon thing, like a fan support situation where people can pay $1 a month or more to just try to convince me to keep writing songs, which I really appreciate, because it's
have
like,
you still been writing through?
Oh yeah. In fact, I have 11 song demos right now for the next rock record.
Wow.
And that's another great thing about the acoustic, is that like after spending a year of like acoustic, I was just dying to get the electric out and start, because it really, I just like to change it up.
Yeah.
To me, it gets boring if it's all bashing cymbals. But after a year of acoustic, that started feeling boring, and so it was like trying to learn how to shred a little bit, and also the things that I learned while making the acoustic record are making the rock demos are sounding really good, and I'm excited about it. So
are there rock versions of the new songs that are on Simmer Down, or is this
I
like
have
11?
So far, all this stuff is brand new. So I think I have 12 songs right now that I actually like, of music and lyrics, and none of those are the Simmer Down ones. I mean, we could do a Simmer Down one. It might be fun, but making a record is a huge investment of time.
Yeah.
And so it's whether any of those songs would be better to do than a brand new one is a tough judgment call.
It's just that sort of backwards engineering, right? So if you had a rock song and then kind of stripped it down and made it acoustic, now to try to do it the other direction, I think is sort of a neat exercise.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, like I said, with Escalating Quickly, all of them started out, not all of them, but most of them started out as acoustic, or at least the ones I wrote. Like on Escalating Quickly, I wrote 0 songs with an electric guitar.
Wow.
0.
Was that the first time you had really done it?
But the other guys submitted some.
Yeah.
First time what?
That you had really done it that way, writing exclusively on acoustic for that record?
Yeah, I think so. Just because I never used to have a good quality acoustic guitar. It was only within the last few years that I played an acoustic guitar and tried to learn on a guitar, but it was only the last few years where I invested in getting like a quality instrument and taking it with me on the tour, with Jimmy Eat World and Weird Al and stuff, where I was so as a sound engineer, my tour days are often like 15-hour days, like really like, and a lot of pressure. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure, and you get kind of exhausted, and playing and singing an acoustic during a break was like a really refreshing thing, where like sometimes I'd take a nap in the middle of the day, like if I have time off. But playing an acoustic, like a lot of times a nap, when I'm done, I'm not invigorated. Whereas if I play and sing for even a half hour, when I get done, I'm energized. There's something about your brain, like having to think of the lyrics and the music and the vocalization. It's like, it's a very visceral thing. It's kind of like playing a video game, but also your body's more involved. And it basically wakes you up. So I just made it a habit that like every day I would spend that time, and maybe half of it was playing old songs and half of it was trying to write new songs. And so that's kind of how that developed. But yeah, that was kind of the idea, would be, especially if we were running low on material, like the idea I think would be to create an acoustic and then a rock album and just keep flip-flopping them.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have enough rock songs, I could always go back to the best acoustic songs and rockify them, and vice versa. Like if if we're looking for acoustic songs, like some of these rock songs, I can't wait to play on acoustic. But I like in the last few weeks, I've only picked up an acoustic guitar like twice.
Really?
Literally just focus on like let's make just a rad shredding record. Because I know a lot of people were disappointed with Escalating. Not a lot of people, but some of our old fans were disappointed that Escalating Quickly was so poppy and so like happy and upbeat and stuff. And so I think it'll be fun to. So they had that, and then they had an acoustic record.
Yeah, right.
So people were like, "I want shred," and it's like just all this gentle stuff.
I want to go forward.
Yeah. So the next record, at least now, like the way that it's turning out, it's pretty aggressive. So that there's still a lot of melodic parts on it, but
right.
It's like written as like, this is gonna like be rock. This is gonna be aggressive, and written on electric guitar with that in mind. And so I'm excited about it.
Well, let's let people absorb Simmer Down for a while too. I like the idea of going to
Yeah.
an aggressive skate punk record too, because that's always going to be my wheelhouse. But let's let people absorb this because there's some really cool moments on Simmer Down.
Well, luckily or not, it like making a record, the process is like months and months of, so
Yeah,
I'm talking about it now,
right,
but the reality is it won't be out till, maybe next May at the
right,
earliest.
right.
So there'll be plenty of time.
And you'll be sick of playing plugged in songs by that point because you'll
Yeah. And then I'll be ready to write the acoustic. But I think that's the cool thing is just going back and forth,
yeah,
whether it's touring or with songwriting or even just rehearsing. I just get bored quickly and doing something different makes it like where I want to do it. And
yeah,
what's the point of being in a band? I mean, it's not like we're making money. So it's
yeah,
like,
right,
but if I can be excited about it, like you start the day and go like, oh yeah, I really want to pick up that acoustic guitar. I haven't played that in a long time. Or, I want to work on this one song. And like right now I'm really excited because there was a song that I just put lyrics to that my guitarist wrote and I'm just loving it because he wrote a different chord progression than I would have done. And the vocal that I just did over it, I just love. Like it was just
yeah,
in my head for the last like day solid. And it's cool to be excited about it.
yeah,
And if I only did the rock stuff, I probably wouldn't feel that way. And if
right,
I only did acoustic, I probably wouldn't feel that way. But by switching back and forth and like taking breaks, it keeps it fresh.
right. I just realized that it is after 5 o'clock, which means we've been talking for an hour. That has kind of flown by. I don't know if it's
Well,
the
good.
same.
I mean, I
I think
have the
it's kind
gift
of
of
flown by.
gab, I hope.
No, I love it. This is a great conversation, and I would like to keep going, but I don't think it's going to let me.
Yeah, we'll have to carry on in your backyard sometime. So
I
you can save up your pennies and
I would love that.
I hope I can count on you for a little date on the way down. There's a lot of people in Florida who want us to go down there, but in order to hit Florida, I probably have to make my way across Canada and then down the East Coast. So
Yeah, there's probably a lot of those people in Quebec too. Quebec seems to love, for whatever reason, the sort of acoustic songwriter punk rock thing. I
oh
know
yeah.
Joey
Yeah.
and Tony were big up there, and guys like that. That they love that up in Quebec for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of been the mecca for skate punk for a
Yeah,
while, and it's gone up and down, but yeah, for sure. That's why I mentioned going to Quebec is
yeah.
like right now my drummer's from Quebec, so
Okay.
the current plan is we're supposed to play festivals in Europe next summer, which I don't know if it can happen,
Right.
but if it does, we need to rehearse. So I need to rehearse in Quebec. So I was going to drive like through Seattle, Portland, up into Vancouver, then drive all the way across Canada by myself
Yeah.
with the band, with the
Yeah.
gear in it for the guys, hit Quebec, rehearse the band, play some shows with the band, fly out to Europe and play that. But maybe I could do that. Maybe if that doesn't happen, maybe I could do that. And instead of, from Quebec going there, going down the East Coast, swinging by Boston, and then getting to those people in Florida that are going to have a revolt if we don't get down there soon. And we
Florida's a
probably have
long
some
way.
friends in Texas and stuff too. So like make our way across the South back to LA. But I don't know. I just throwing it out there that these kind of chats and stuff like that's kind of fun for me. And that's
Yeah.
why I think that especially, I mean, we didn't even get into like all my old stories with like, working for Prince and
I
things
know.
like
I
that.
didn't ask you Prince stories.
Yeah, I got all kinds of those chestnuts that we can like, bring up and it like little backyard things where we're playing songs and chatting. I think it would be a good time, and I like the idea too of like not pressure of like
Yeah.
giant shows and a really critical crowd and trying to please new people. It's like let's just do a house party where it's just fun and there's like
Yeah.
30 or 40 people at the most and just singing and having good time and no pressure and lots of time to chat and hang out. People
Talk
can buy
about
a shirt or a skateboard deck.
Prince at the Super Bowl. That's one of the most iconic because you did the Super Bowl with Prince, right?
Yeah, yeah.
One
I
of the
have
most,
stories, but
probably the
we've
most.
already gone past the time limit, so we're gonna just have to.
We'll,
But that's
we'll,
a great way to like leave them hanging.
absolutely.
So that they always say to leave them wanting more. So
Right.
yeah, let's hang out and whether it's a backyard or another uh, interview someday.
I
But thank you so much. Thanks for having me on there. And
yeah.
10-foot pole is coming to a town near you as soon as it's safe and
I
or
look
just me
forward to
playing
it.
acoustic guitar.
Yeah, I very much look forward to that. Even to talking again like this someday. I very much look forward to it. Yours is
Well, thank you. I'm glad you like Simmer Down. I'm pretty excited about it, um, and excited to do the next thing, and hopefully that'll be hopefully I'll be able to just kind of keep making music
yeah,
into the sunset without things getting too rough here.
right. Best of luck riding out the rest of the pandemic. I know this is a tough spot for people who make their living in the music and the arts and film and stage and whatever. I know that this is brutal for people.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it has been.
so best of luck to you. And hopefully people buy this record and don't just stream it on Spotify, because you have to listen to it 63 million times before you'll see a dollar. So
Yeah,
but buy
yeah.
the damn record.
I mean, if people want to support the band, they're certainly welcome to become patrons and do the Patreon thing. But yeah, for collectors, there is all kinds of different colors of vinyl, and
Mhm.
there's CDs and there's cassettes, but some of the benefits of being a patron on the Patreon thing is that there's some items that are specific to patrons. So if you're at the higher level, like you can get test pressings and things
Sure.
like that
Sure.
are we try to make it we try to pay back, give benefits in some way that people feel supported, but mostly they just want to hear like what are the next songs. And if
Yeah.
my wife works at Amazon right now, and she's the one who's really paying the bills to,
Yeah.
we're going in debt, but she's, helping us to not go like,
Right.
go totally down. And, I might need to join her at some point, but if we have enough support, hopefully I could keep making songs. Because the reality is, if I'm working 60 hours a week, it's going to be a lot harder to crank out music.
Right. Yeah, the lengths that people have to go to, like, I'm all in support of bands doing whatever it is that they need to do in order to make money, especially now. I mean, it's been trending in that direction anyway because of the state of the music industry for
Yeah.
people that aren't the top 1%. But whatever people have to do to make money, if it's do it, sell 87 different copies of vinyl records and test presses and handwritten lyrics, and you know what? There's
Yeah,
enough.
I'm about to put a memorabilia page
Yeah.
up. And it's going to have guitars and things on it too. I'm selling old guitars and amps, but things like old T-shirts and things, just like what you're saying, is
Yeah.
to try to raise money. I mean,
Yeah.
what good is it to me to have a bunch of old shirts in the garage sitting there? But
Right.
some people are really into it. Like, not even just 10-foot pole. Like, I've got an
Yeah.
old Lagwagon long sleeve European tour shirt, and it's like,
Sure.
someone paid Dan from 88 Fingers of Louie was selling shirts for like $100 each of
Yeah.
these old punk shirts. And and maybe someone would, it's for a good cause.
Exactly.
But maybe it's worth it to somebody to pay $100 to have a shirt from 30 years ago from
Sure.
a special show or something.
Absolutely.
So, but I'll let you go. I really appreciate it. And please, anybody, 10footpole.com. I handle all the socials and everything, at least at this moment, until we have like a huge hit and I can pay someone else to do it. But really appreciate it, Jason. And
thank you so much.
Hope to see you out there on the road someday. And best wishes for safety and health and security for everybody. Please be careful and safe out there.
Fingers crossed we'll get to say hi in person soon. So
yeah, hope so.
Thanks, Denny.
Thanks again.
Great.
Take care. It's Dennis from 10 Foot Pole signing off.
Thank you.